At this time, I would like to invite my co-host, Amanda Achtman, to turn her camera and microphone on as I introduce her to come share her faith journey with us. So, Amanda is from Calgary, Alberta, and currently lives in Canada's capital of Ottawa. She studied political science in her hometown and recently completed a master's degree in John Paul II Philosophical Studies at Catholic University of Lublin in Poland. She has attended more than 100 seminars, conferences, and programs throughout North America, Europe, and the Middle East, and is currently working as an assistant to a conservative and foreign policy-minded member of parliament. So I've gotten to know Amanda a little bit over these past few months, and I am very excited to hear her story because she's a fascinating person. So please join me in welcoming Amanda as she shares her faith journey with us.
Thank you, Jason. Well, I'm delighted to share with all of you. I suppose I'll begin with saying that my mom's mother was Jewish, because this is a sentence on which all of my identity pivots and revolves, even though she was the only of my grandparents who I never had the opportunity to meet. She became Catholic before she married my Catholic grandfather. And so my mom was raised Catholic. She went to Catholic church and Catholic schools with limited knowledge of her Jewish roots, but still that was there. Then my mom ended up marrying a Jew from Montreal who agreed to raise a Catholic family, given the importance of the Catholic faith to my mother. And as my parents were preparing for marriage, they were going through marriage prep within the Catholic Church and going through all of the ordinary questions that couples consider as they're beginning to begin their lives together. And my dad offered to go to Mass every other Sunday with my mom, which the priest and my mom thought was pretty good for a Jew. My father had been raised up until his bar mitzvah, going to the synagogue with his twin brother. But around that time, after his bar mitzvah, my grandfather was becoming more skeptical of religion, and so didn't insist on the boys going to synagogue anymore. And so my father and my uncle would play hockey on Saturday mornings instead. My parents got married in the Catholic Church, and my mom, having been a lifelong Catholic, and my dad committed to raising a Catholic family because of the importance to her, while still not converting. And so this is how I came to be raised Catholic by my Jewish parents. My parents found common ground on the things that united them, and there are many. Through exploring our family history, they deepened in the traditions and had a sense of enthusiasm for exposing my brother and me to both traditions. They thought, wouldn't this be neat to give them some experience of both? And so my brother and I had some experience of Christmas and Hanukkah and Passover and Easter, a sort of cultural infusion of these traditions in our family life, which was really beautiful. It would be the same week that I'd go to the Outdoor Way of the Cross and the Jewish Film Festival at our local synagogue. As a child, I had a lot of religious sensitivity, and I always showed a keen interest in these things. When I was a teenager, my grandparents moved from Toronto to Calgary, and shortly after my bubby passed away, then Zeta moved in with my family. And he lived with us from the time that he was 89 until he passed away when he was 96. In this context, I got to become very close to him because I was in my high school and early university years. And so I learned about how he came to Canada from Poland in 1937. I learned about his upbringing and trajectory and how he had read the great books and then became more of a skeptic toward religion. We became very close. We went on dates at Italian restaurants. I would leave my term papers on his pillow, and he would leave the Canadian Jewish News on mine. We had a very special relationship, and it continues to nourish me to this day. He still hoped, however, that I would give up my belief in God, and that I might do this by reading the great books of the tradition of Western civilization. And so I went on to pursue of my own interest a liberal arts degree. And he also thought, well, if studying the great books won't do it, then perhaps facing up to the history of the Holocaust would. And so I took that as kind of a dare from my Zeta and studied liberal arts. And in my first year of university, went on a Holocaust study trip to Germany and Poland with 2 survivors and 60 students from all across Canada. This trip was formative for me, and probably it's not an exaggeration to say that there isn't a day that goes by that I don't recall that trip in some way. Basically, it led me to question all sorts of topics and to engage with questions of Jewish identity, morality, and mortality. I remember thinking that if dehumanization is at the core of genocide, then what does it mean to humanize humanity? I wanted to know the antidote. And I also remember visiting Majdanek, a former camp, and pressing my hand against the monument, praying, Lord, etch this in my memory and engrave this upon my conscience, because I don't ever want to forget the testimony of the survivors that I've heard in this place. And so with that education and the question about what it means to humanize humanity, I studied political science, and I was attracted to especially German Jewish thinkers like Hans Jonas and Hannah Arendt. And I completed my studies in political science before going and working for a couple of years in practical advocacy and work in journalism at a startup. After that, I saw a 2-minute video promoting a master's program that was being offered for the very first time in English, an MA in John Paul II Philosophical Studies that was being offered at the Catholic University of Lublin. And I felt that God was saying, leave your country, go to the land that I will show you. It's Poland. And my grandfather had died only a week or 2 prior to me seeing this video. And so I felt a sense of permission and call to go and enter into this master's program and to live and steep in Jewish Catholic relations in the history of the 20th century, and to study the life and thought of John Paul II and so many other noble lives that I would encounter. As soon as I got to Poland, I also realized that I was only 15 minutes away from Majdanek, the camp that I thought I would never return to again in my life, where I then became a regular volunteer. I felt if I was going to study in that city, that I certainly needed to go and be a volunteer and a guide, and to give this history its due through my engagement with it. This was a time of cultivating my sense of responsibility and gratitude and wonder. And I think that responsibility and gratitude are 2 of the key themes that I really receive, particularly from the Jewish tradition. And yet I could find a way to achieve some synthesis of those key themes in my life within the life and thought of John Paul II. It was during my time in Poland that I went to Israel for my first time. It was a quick, cheap flight down from Warsaw to Israel. And since then, I have been 5 times on trips of different natures, from a Catholic pilgrimage to more Jewish-oriented trips to geopolitical trips. And all of this has cultivated in me a love for promoting pluralism and nuanced, humanizing approaches to the conflicts and tensions that we see. I'm telling the story in a brief way, and I hope you can see that the joy that these 2 traditions brings to me. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there is tension and there is angst, maybe not so much when I was a teenager, receiving it in a preliminary way with all sorts of openness, although I did study philosophy and I am concerned with the truth, and I am active in both the Jewish and Catholic communities today. And so there certainly are experiences of tension, of confrontation, of difficulty, and even moments where I've questioned, is it really worth it? And in those moments where I've had that question and I've searched to try to ask and find if it's worth continuing it with this Jewish Catholic thread of my life, I have found that God is saying to me, receive the double gift. As long as you are receiving with gratitude and wonder these two traditions, then it will not be a source of angst, or at least it will be such, it will be so in such a way that is more than bearable, and that will bring a lot of new friendships, such as the friendships that I found in this community and others. So I'm very grateful for that. And I would also say that I have the sense that my family is most my family when we are doing the Jewish and Catholic things. This is the thread of continuity throughout my life. From all the places I've traveled and all the people I've met, I continue to receive the double gift of my Jewish Catholic faith. And that is a story that has begun and is set to continue. Thanks for letting me share it with you.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Amanda.